I'm going to give you 10 things, though, that every Christian should know about President Trump and what he's done that reflect the biblical worldview, and many of which you might not know.
Yeah.
So we'll start with number one, most pro-life president in American history, right? First president to speak at the March for Life, slashed Planned Parenthood funding, rescinded the Mexico City policy, which is no more international funding of abortion, has been outspoken about life beginning at conception, has also appointed Gorsuch Kavanaugh, we'll get to that in a little bit in a second, and also Amy Coney Barrett, most pro-life president in American history. Number two, Israel. Every Bible-believing Christian should care about the state of Israel. President Trump has just signed one of the most unbelievable, miraculous peace deals in the history of geopolitics between Israel and the UAE. Now, you might hate him, but you gotta love this deal. You might not like his style, but you better love this deal because he has brought the Emiratis and the Arab world to the table, and they've signed a peace deal with God's chosen people, which we are told in the Word of God is the Jews, the state of Israel. Moved the embassy to Jerusalem, recognized Golan Heights, kept the Palestinian Authority in check, rescinded the Iran deal, and finally, for the first time in a couple decades, we now have the most peaceful atmosphere between the state of Israel and the Arab world, which was told to be impossible. It's something worthy of applauding. Number three, judges. We have a whole book about judges, don't we? We believe that fair and correct interpretation of the law is a biblical principle. Not what you want it to say, not what you think it should say, but what does the law say? We find that in the Bible, right? 200 circuit court judges, the most ever since George Washington, has been confirmed to the federal bench under President Donald Trump. Many of these people are God-fearing. Many of these people will defend life, and they do defend the right for religious liberty and for Christians to assemble. Also, Gorsuch Kavanaugh, and a third, the trifecta, Amy Coney Barrett, that will contest for first principles and, yes, the fight for life. Fourth thing, we believe in second chances, right? That's part of the whole idea of redemption. President Donald Trump signed the most historic and transformative prison reform in our country's history, called the First Step Act. A lot of people don't know this happened, but it wasn't the Democrats, it wasn't Barack Obama. He signed the First Step Act a year and a half ago saying people that have these very long life sentences, not life sentence, but multi-decade sentences, and they've proven good behavior, good credit system. They've earned the goodwill of the prison guards, and it's obvious that they are ready for re-entry. There should be a way to do that. 1,800 prisoners that were never given a second chance at life have been successfully re-entered into society using the First Step Act under President Trump, many of whom are black and brown people in our country. Right. That's President Trump. Many people don't know that. Fifth thing, we love our veterans and those people that have served in our military, and we should. It's the ultimate sacrifice to bleed and to die for America. President Trump signed the VA Accountability Act to give better health care to our veterans. 40 years they talked about it. He finally delivered it. It was historic, being able to fire bad people at the Veterans Affairs, and finally the delivery of care is going up tremendously. Number six, the Right to Try Act. We all believe that terminal diseases is one of the hardest things for us to be able to reconcile as believers. There's a lot of things that we just struggle with, right? And like, how could a child be given a tumor that is just not able to be treated? For years, the pharmaceutical companies were trying to get Washington, D.C. to be able to pass something called the Right to Try Act, where people that have terminal diseases, they've been given a death certificate, are able to try drugs that would be deemed more risky. What's a better patient to try it on than an actual human being? Before President Trump, someone was not able to use these drugs. He got everyone in a room together, got rid of the liability measure, and people, real life stories that I have met, have had their lives saved due to the Right to Try Act passed under President Trump. Pretty extraordinary, unbelievable. Number seven, the Tax Reform Act, the biggest middle-class tax cut in American history, which included an expansion of the working mother's tax cut, and yes, paid family leave. I think that we as conservatives and Christians, I don't know if you're conservative, we as Christians should make it easier to have children in our country. It's a biblical principle. It wasn't Obama, it wasn't the Democrats, it was President Trump that signed paid family leave for 8 weeks so that you can borrow or take from your Social Security money, which is a very fiscally sound way to do it, and say, I want to be able to have children, I want to be able to be with my children for a couple months, paid family leave. A lot of people don't even know this exists. A lot of people say, I didn't know that. That's interesting. Number eight, probably one of the least appreciated things that happens on the landscape, but President Trump has reasserted American sovereignty. For decades, we have eroded America's role in the world, kowtowing to internationalist organizations such as NATO, such as the United Nations, such as the World Trade Organization, and basically eroding America's role in the world. Retreating from those and reasserting first principles in the Constitution has resulted in a lot of these sinister and secular internationalist and globalist forces being confounded that all of a sudden America makes choices for America. Number 9, prior to the shutdown, we experienced the greatest economy in world history. You might say, I don't care about finances. Well, you might care about this. 6 million black people got off food stamps and into meaningful work under President Trump. That's a good thing. Off of government assistance, onto self-reliance.
Beautiful.
That all of a sudden that they didn't have to look for government for their next paycheck, but they had a paycheck or for some form of government or financial assistance. And the 10th thing, I should say, 10 things that Christians should care about is, of course, he has gone out of his way to surround himself with people of faith. He's unapologetic to speak at churches. He serves with an outspoken man of faith, Mike Pence. He has people pray over him every single day. I equate him in a lot of different ways. I understand this can be confusing for people. How can a 3 times married, twice divorced playboy from New York, though some side says things you're like, I don't like that, be the most pro-life president, surround himself with people of faith, stand with Israel? How does that work? Well, of course God is going to work in a way that confuses you. That's called Samson, Cyrus, King David. I mean, let's just get used to this, right? And I will say this. Let's use the Samson example.
He's my favorite.
I can't go to your children's ministry right next door and teach the story of Samson without some sort of edits. God came to Samson twice while he was with a prostitute. I'll just stop there, okay? Samson contested for truth. And eventually God came to him in the later form of his life, and he earned a part in the hall of faith that we all know in Hebrews. So this idea that like he's a bad guy, I don't like him, so they say, what is he contending for? He's contending for the rights of the unborn, for Israel. He's contending against child sex trafficking, which would be a nice 11th on that list, doing more to end the scourge of child sex trafficking in our country than any other president in our history. $100 million just got reallocated to ending child sex trafficking on our southern border. So look, I get it. As Christians, it might be a very blunt thing, and I'm not trying to turn this into a political rally, but understand those are 11 very clear differences right there. And I'm not saying that puzzle piece should fit perfectly, but does it fit better? Does that align better with your worldview, with what you want to see that happens right in the world? I think he gets so misportrayed in our media. I think he gets so misrepresented. And this is a man that has just been persecuted and assailed and is now obviously going through a health trial that none of us would have possibly expected. And so he's my friend. I'm honored to call him a friend. And I'm also able to say that this man has done more for the priority list of evangelicals or for Christians more so than any other president in my lifetime.
That's true. That's true.